Hey, welcome to another episode of the Overcome University podcast. I'm your host, Michael Allison. Today we have an extraordinary guest, Dr. Taya, a trusted authority on midlife health and wellness, particularly for high-achieving women. She has been seen on NBC, CBS, and ABC. Also is now an author. Hey, Dr. Taya, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Michael.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you here. And for your particular topic and your particular experience, you've been through a good bit of resilience, health, and now speaking about hope and helping people. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal journey of just navigating through like premenopause, menopause, and how has that inspired your work that you're doing now today?
Okay, well, my original career, if you like, is as a physician, and you're going, you're midlife, you're jiving, and things are going, and all of a sudden you think, "Hey, what's happening to me?" You don't quite know. At least I didn't quite know, but I was not sleeping as well as I used to, and I used to be a very good sleeper. I was wait horrors, you know, my clothes no longer fit. The belt was getting tighter, and I was just exhausted. I was just exhausted and working all kinds of hours just to keep up with the workload.
Mhm.
And it just came to a head one day at work when I had these three not very typical hot flashes. And all of a sudden, I started putting things together. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm in midlife, I'm having these changes, and these hot flushes were just the kind of like, pop on the head to say, hey, you are going towards menopause. And so that was a shock to my system because we weren't really taught much about it in medical school. But, that was where that particular journey began. And it was a grueling journey. There was just almost no guidance.
If you would, for our listeners that's listening and may not even be familiar with the term, can you kind of like give a little backstory or the background in regards to what menopause is, so they could actually be much more aware of what it is now today?
Absolutely. And, I've had to learn too. Menopause, which one already knows, menopause is a date in time, and it's when a woman stops menstruating for 12 consecutive months.
Hmm.
So she's been having, periods on and off, but there comes a time when 12 consecutive months she counts and there has been no period at all during those 12 months, then she's in menopause, which means your hormones, which were declining, have reached their base level. The period before that, while the hormones are declining and you're having all these symptoms of hot flashes, etc., they're coming online, that is when you call perimenopause, which is
Okay.
just the area before menopause. And obviously, after menopause, which is a date, most people refer to as postmenopause.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So I'm learning a lot more here about it. So for someone that is maybe thinking they have that or feeling that, what are some signs and symptoms that would actually give them a clue that, you know what, maybe I'm going through this, maybe I'm actually in this moment right now?
Yes. Um, because it's a decline in your reproductive hormones for women, it's usually a change. Your periods become irregular. You had periods before, they become irregular. Some months they come early, some months they come late. It could be light, it could be heavy, it could be a flood, it could be a famine, it could be all sorts of things. And on top of that, you have the early, what I call the early symptoms, which are things like feeling exhausted, which I had, which are feeling not sleeping properly, and which are, putting on weight. And you just think, oh, I'm stressed. I'm not doing things, I'm not eating properly and I'm putting weight, and you're going on all kinds of diets and all kinds of things. By the time you get to a hot flash, most people are aware that, oh my gosh, that must be a signal of, getting on the menopause journey. So that will take you onwards. And of course, part of it is also the multiplicity of symptoms. It's not just those three, there's a whole lot more. Skin changes, uh, you know, um, loss of libido, loss of desire. There are all kinds of things: heart palpitations, headaches, migraines. There's all kinds of things, and almost anything you can think of, simply because estrogen, which is the main hormone that most people know about, is in practically every cell of our body. So as
Hmm.
it takes away that energy that it brought on board when you had puberty, you have all these things declining. You now start putting on weight. You now start having susceptibility to, becoming overweight and type 2 diabetes, heart disease, brain fog, mood swings, those kind of things where you talk of the antsy woman in midlife. It's all
Hmm.
part of it. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. I was asking that question also just because I've had different conversations with different women throughout my life, and some of them have done things in regards to like not having babies or things around that, which would cause them to not have periods, so they don't get to have some of those same experiences as other women. So that's why I was following up with that question. I want to
Mhm.
ask you this: how did your experience as a doctor leave you feeling unprepared for hormonal changes of menopause?
Well, the assumption, I thought there was a feedback. The assumption is that as a doctor, you must know about these things. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, at the time, and even now, I don't think it's taught as much in medical school as it ought to be. All we learned in medical school when I was there was that there was a decline in the hormones, you get to menopause, and that's the end. There was nothing about the symptoms, nothing about the multiplicity, nothing about how you would recognize it, nothing. And there's no, they say, they're thinking about a few tests for it, but no real test, because you can still go to doctors, and some of my clients go to doctors today who tell them they're normal when they clearly aren't.
All right.
They're fanning themselves, they're hot, they're moody, they're antsy, and all kinds of other things. They're not normal. They're in perimenopause because your hormones, as it's going down, it's not in a straight line. It's undulating. So you have good days, you have not so good days.
So for yourself, so since you was going through this challenge and going through all of these adversities, what were some of the challenges that you were facing, let's say emotionally, physically, mentally? What was some of the challenges that you were facing, and what were some of the strategies that you had to implement and put in place for you to overcome some of those challenges that you were facing?
Yes, that was initially being the nice, well trained doctor that I was supposed to be. I was put on hormone treatment. And for 9 whole months after that, I remember 9 whole months, I was still barely sleeping well. And I was
Mhm.
beside myself because sleep is one of those things that, gives a lot of vitality to the rest of what you're doing. So I was not. And I kept on putting on weight. And I tried all kinds of diets, you name it, I did it. And trying also atypical things. Because after a while, I realized that the hormones weren't working for me. And therefore, I had to come out of that medical box and look for something else that might work. Anything. Energy healing, acupuncture, acupressure, you name it, I tried it. And there was this isn't called the zapper. I was just remembering that was more. I tell you, all kinds of things. Just homeopathy, essential oils, etc. Nothing really worked.
Mhm.
Um, so it was that, and therefore I said, okay, it's not working the conventional way, and all these kind of like almost snake oil things that I'm doing, not snake
Right,
oil.
right.
They were not giving real changes. Yes, exactly. So, and then I got to a stage where 5 years later, I was talking to a male colleague, funnily enough, and for some reason, you just talk about things with each other, and he says, "Gosh, that dosage of your hormones are way too high."
Mm.
And I thought, even I was not aware that they were way too high. And I thought, okay. And I came off it. And the funny thing is that all the other things that I had been putting in place, because, like I
Mhm.
said, after the 9 month period, and I said, this isn't changing, I started putting all kinds of things in place. All of a sudden, it was like they were waiting for me to get off the hormones, the hormone treatment. It
Mhm.
was like coming out, and I was feeling like I was blooming. I was getting back my energy, sleeping better. Yes. So I had all these things in terms of physically. Yes, it was mostly the sleep, which was leading to and the exhaustion. So I was spending all hours working, really,
Mhm.
and I was not as social as I wanted to be because I just needed to conserve energy. You understand?
Right,
And
right.
yeah, so that was that really, and so that was coming out of that was such a relief because productivity went down. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to follow up and say you showed a great sign of resilience in regards to like fighting through that challenge. So, can you share anything from like your upbringing, let's say from Nigeria, and some of the challenges that you may have faced in your early life? And did any of that influence for you to start being much more resilient and just starting becoming much more resourceful?
Oh yes. I would take it all back to my childhood. I was born in Britain actually, and
Actually.
then the parents moved a few years later to Nigeria, which is where I
Mhm.
spent most of my early life into university. And so then they had what can only be described as a nasty divorce.
Mm.
Um, it was traumatic because from being, and my father left. So he left my mother with 4 children uh, to cater for herself and basically hands off.
Hmm.
So here is a woman who was not allowed to work, who now had 4 children to look after and had to move out of the home we had. So we're nice, kind of like comfortable middle class people. All of a sudden, we found ourselves in strange circumstances like,
Hmm.
oh my God, what just happened? So, yeah.
Hmm.
And from not being able to work, and I say this as homage to my mother who passed away 3 years ago,
Hmm.
from not being able to work and having 4 children in tow, she started with 24 chickens. And out of those 24 chickens, built, you could say, almost an empire. Certainly influenced, became a poultry. She called herself a poultry farmer, built an
Wow.
industry. And that was just sheer grit, resilience, kind of like, nothing's going to stop me. I'm going to do everything for my children to get, what I hope for them. Yeah, that grit, that determination, that can do it, will do it, won't take no for an answer. Yeah, that's where it
And
came
man,
from.
wow, more power to your mom. And obviously she was a great influence to you.
Oh.
I want to ask you this. So like within like your company and your organization, I see that you have this thing called the High Achiever Menopause Power Pack. How is that helping women during their midlife right now?
Well, what it does is give them a somewhere to leap onto properly onto
Hmm.
how to get through menopause. Because the thing is that people must realize it's not just about finding the right exercise or the right diet or sleeping the right way. You have to have all those things together. Menopause doesn't happen in a silo. It's all the things that feed together into it. So it feeds in with, I have a natural science-backed lifestyle process, which
Hmm.
is strategically put together. So it gives you, delivers what I call compound interest. So you
Hmm.
don't just solve for sleep, or you don't just solve for nutrition, or you just don't solve for um, movement, or you don't just solve for, brain health, which is an important one for high achieving women. You solve for everything together strategically. And so there's a flywheel that's built up that spirals
I
such,
see.
yeah, such that you have like compound interest. I mean,
Hmm.
imagine you put so much in the bank, and after so many years, or period of time, you get much more than you put in, and that's the way it's been put together. So that's what the power pack does. It gives you those elements. It gives you something to, with your food, with your movement, with your sleep. Yeah, energy. If you want an instant boost in energy, you can get it. Yeah, sure.
I love the holistic approach. For our listeners that are listening, can you share with us what are some of the common misconception about perimenopause or menopause that they frequently and that you frequently encounter?
Well, frequently encounter is that, oh, I can't do anything about it. It's like, you know, it's there, it's a stage in life. And society feeds into that to say, you're past your prime, you're not good for anything, your productivity. And it's still happening till this very day,
Hmm.
whereby you have a huge pay gap between, at a certain age, between the men and the women doing the same job.
All right.
there, there's just a gender pay gap. And it's because at that stage, that menopause, perimenopause knocks women flat on their backs.
Hmm.
And they need some support in order to get through it, to get to the other side, which is wonderful. But to get through it actually, shall we say, stifles many women because
Mm.
they can't cope. So that's what that does. Yeah.
So I think this is a game changer. Can you share with our audience and share with our women that are listening? How does this your approach differ from conventional medical solutions that's currently out there right now?
Great question. Because most of the time, people hear menopause, if they know anything about it, it is treated, and you do treatment for diseases. It's not a
Right.
disease, it's not contagious, it's not acquired. It's something natural that will happen to every woman. Just live long enough, and that's in your starts in your 40s. And
Hmm.
most people don't realize that it actually can start as early as your 40s.
Hmm.
Here's why. The average age of menopause, which is when those periods stop, is 51. And
Mm.
periods happen somewhere between 7 and 10 years before then. Of course, that takes you into your early 40s. And sometimes these days, we're even having late 30s. So a lot of women think in their 40s, can't be me, it's not happening. They're in denial, they don't want it. It's because they feel that it's the end of life as they know it, it's the end
Mm.
of their youth. So those are the common consumptions, or there's nothing that can be done about it, or that they have to have hormone treatment, which is not true, and certainly wasn't for me. So those are the common misconceptions. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. So I want you, if you could share like your expertise, seeing that you've come across quite a few different women, high achieving women. What are some things that they could actually do now to be much more proactive rather than it hits them and they're in that moment and they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? So, what are some things they could do prior to even getting to that particular moment?
I think awareness is key.
Okay.
Being aware so they can actually start down the road. So my power pack, you don't actually have to be in menopause. If you start with that power pack along the way, it'll give you some steps and you can therefore move further down the path of making sure you put the changes that you need before it hits you, before
Hmm.
it affects. And if you do and put it into place, there is no reason why you should actually struggle with menopause. You can actually just sail through it, breeze through it, because you've put things in place. Unfortunately, 85+% of women have significant menopause changes, which attempts to take them down. Now, if you know that and you say, guess what, I don't really want to be one of those 45% and end up with, brain fog, end up losing my confidence, end up working all hours and just feeling tired like stink, you can actually start making those changes. And those changes will allow you to actually bypass, to a large extent, the ill effects or the, more significant effects of menopause. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you. So, based off of your experience, can you share some success stories if you don't need to share anyone's name, but from like using your particular proprietary method that you've seen where someone has came to you, may have been going through menopause and was struggling, and they've used your methodology, they've used your protocols, and now they're a successful, thriving story.
Well, okay. One that one particularly comes to mind. I will say Miss D. Anyway, she had just finished a doctorate and she was
Mhm.
really, tired like anything. And she was wondering what was going on. She couldn't sleep. She had achy joints, was wanting to play with her grandchildren, but couldn't keep up with them. She was feeling tired, even just walking a few steps. And she wanted help. And she reached out to me through her daughter, who I knew, or rather, her daughter reached out to me. And we took it at her own pace. There was nothing high energy. You must do this in this time. We said, okay, fine. You want to take it in your own pace? We will take it in your pace. It was those tweaks that we did that in a period of, and she took a break in the middle of it. So, but for an aggregate period of 8 weeks, she came on and she was like, she you could see the glow in her. She was like a different person. It was like, oh, wow. Oh, tell me about it. And she started by saying, I feel calm. So a lot of people underestimate the ability of feeling calm to affect your entire life and your demeanor and your perception. But anyway,
Mhm.
feel calm. Okay, tell me more. We already knew that she had been already put on the roads to sleeping properly. So we had already sorted that out. You know, then we sorted out the bit of okay, movement, small movements, small movements. Let's start that, but let's develop the habits that will carry you through. And so with that and with some eating habits, we combined all of them because it was what you do about your nutrition in relation to sleep, in relation to exercise, in relation to what enhances what, when. So if you know certain things, you'll know that, guess what? If you want to exercise earlier in the day will get you to sleep earlier, will you'll fall asleep faster in the evening.
Mhm.
Hey, who knew? But those kind of things. Yeah. So by the time she came on, she was like ticking all the boxes and saying, hey, I'm ready, because she was starting a business and she really wanted to be in good form to be able to do so. She was being able to engage more. She had, she had lost some weight. She didn't want to weigh herself, but she said her clothes fit better. Yeah. So that was one of them. The other one was actually a colleague um, who I noticed was having a fuller face
Uh-huh.
and didn't see her around much and say, hey, what's going on? Let's talk. And she says, hey, if you can do this, I will be so, so, grateful. So, and sleep was the major problem for her. She
Mhm.
complained about her weight, but she said if she could solve for sleep, she would be, she knows that she can solve for everything else, which is generally true, by the way. because sleep is such a huge foundation in our health
Mhm.
and our lives and our wellness. So, and this was an intense period, communicating every day. Hey, suggestions, what have you done? Outcome. What I'll say is that in 5 days only, she had been dependent for years on sleeping pills.
Mm.
And by the fifth day, she decided she could ditch those sleeping pills.
Wow,
So
wow, wow,
ditching
wow.
sleeping pills like that is not a good idea. You should consult your doctor. But
Mhm.
she was a physician, she was responsible for that. But she felt her habits were already grooving to the extent where she was sleeping better and she did not need the support of sleeping pills.
Wow. I recently did a talk and it was around breaking the stigma around mental health.
Mm,
And when we was talking about it, one of the things we talked about was something that you just mentioned, where around stigmas, people feel like they cannot talk around some mental health issues. And one of the things we noticed from the statistics that was looking at is colleagues do not approach their co-colleagues or co-workers about issues and things like that. But you are someone that stepped into a colleague and actually try to help them and get them through whatever they were being challenged or being facing, right?
mm.
So when we dived into that conversation, we was talking about a mindset. Can you talk a little bit about how do mindset and belief for like one's ability impact their ability to overcome some of these challenges whenever they're dealing with menopause?
That is a huge one, Michael. I can tell you that for my clients, we start with mindset
Hmm.
because if you are not committed and if you feel it's not going to work, and I learned this way back when, if you think something's not going to happen and it's not going to work, it's not going to work, or at least it's less likely to work. You already have a barrier and you think you're going to get to the other side and you've put a barrier up there, it's not going to work. So it's so important. And that's why I feel that at least my grounding from what I told you about when I was young and what happened with my mother was important. And what I learned that you keep on going. Um, and delayed gratification is an important thing in this day and age where people want it now and not realizing, as Muhammad Ali says, I'll take the pain now because I'll be on a much easy road later. He says, you can punch me as you like. I'm paraphrasing, but you remember the phrase. He says, I
Yes.
take the pain now because later down the road, I'll be on easy street. And that's what people need to know, that it's a mindset issue. If you're determined, it's willpower. Now, this is something I came across a while back.
Hmm.
Willpower is much stronger than what's willpower stronger than? It's much stronger than some of the choices you make to determine your success.
Hmm.
So willpower is a very strong than intelligence. So willpower is much more um, pivotal than intelligence in talking about success.
Hmm.
So you can be as intelligent as you like, but if you're not using that intelligence and it's not become part of your, shall we say, operating system, it does not matter.
All right.
You're likely to be successful if you have the willpower. I'm sure you've heard of the marshmallow test. Have you heard of the marshmallow test?
Tell me about it. Tell me about it.
Ooh, okay, that was a good one. They call it the marshmallow test. They had these kids. They divided them into two groups. I think they were 5 year
Uh-huh.
olds or something, and they put them in a room, and they were given, I think, one marshmallow,
Okay.
and so that they had choices. They could eat the one marshmallow straight away, or if they waited 5 minutes, they would have two marshmallows.
I actually heard a story, but it was not the marshmallow story, but I heard a similar story yesterday in regards to like delayed gratification. But go ahead.
Yeah, it was so. Yeah, and they showed a video of these kids. They showed a video of these kids, and you'd see some who were stoic, etc. You'd see another one who would go around it, look at it. You'd see the other ones who would touch it, sniff it, lick it, and you see the other one who just said, "Ah, what the hell," and eat it. Maybe after immediately or after a period of time. It was hilarious, but that was a predictor because they follow those kids, and it was a huge predictor in their success and how they went through life. It was a huge predictor. There was a positive correlation between delayed gratification and success.
Mhm. Yep, absolutely. So, what are some practical tips that women could start applying today to start managing some of the menopause symptoms naturally?
Naturally, I would say that holistically, sleep has to be a priority. For high achieving women, they feel that, oh, I'll get this done. And I've had people who say they're surviving on 4 hours sleep, and I say you can't do that because it has
Mhm.
consequences. The consequences. Why do you sleep? It does a couple of things, important things. One, your physical body. It actually looks at your body as a washing machine and clears out the dead cells, repairs others so that you're rejuvenated when you wake up in the morning. Most people don't realize that sleep actually has physical uh, effects. Then,
Yep,
of
yep.
course, there's the mental effects where you take your short-term memory, what you learned during the day, and you put it in long-term memory. And when you can't do that, therefore you start having the problems with down the road dementia. And guess what? Dementia takes about 20 years to happen. And
Mm,
where does dementia start? It is around the same age women go into menopause, which is why women have twice the rate of Alzheimer's disease as men. And most
wow.
people don't realize that sleep is such an important component. Solve for sleep, because when you do sleep well, you can make better decisions. What
Mhm.
you're going to eat, it stops, at least decreases cravings depending on how you feed yourself. You're more likely to do the movement things that you need to do instead of feeling tired all the time. You're more likely to take some time and relax, such that you rejuvenate your body. Because there's a famous quote by Michael Walker, and it goes that sleep is the bridge between despair and hope.
Mm,
And what that's telling you is you go to bed, you're having all these problems, and you have a good night's sleep. And you know how it is. You wake up in the morning thinking, it's a new day.
right.
I can solve this. It's not going to beat me.
Hmm.
But it's sleep that does that. You have that period of going through your sleep, and it just is so much better. Yeah.
Absolutely. As we get ready to wrap up here, you're someone that has extensively traveled the world,
Mm.
and the topic that you're talking about and the people that you're working on, I believe is a global issue. Can you share
Yes.
a little bit about the global impact that you're trying to make in regards to sharing this awareness, sharing this knowledge, and helping women that are actually going through some of these issues right now?
Yes, we have a staggering number ahead of us for next year, and it says 1 billion women will be in perimenopause next year.
Wow.
1B, that is 1/8 of the world population, which is what?
Hmm.
12.5% approximately, which is a huge number. And the majority of them will not have, and if you say 85% of women have significant symptoms, but the majority of these women, if you're able to tap into health, the way we can tap into some health in you know what you call the western countries or the developed countries is
Hmm.
quite different when there's no help elsewhere. And even here it's still a problem, you can imagine. So I am what I call an advocate, a very, very, very strong advocate.
Hmm.
And by putting out the programs and saying, guess what, you don't actually need much, you don't have to be spending a lot of money, you don't have to go on hormone treatment, except, and there's some use for it. I'm not anti hormones, but it is not the be all and end all. And in fact, it's a bit player. Some people are going to hate me saying this. It's a
Hmm.
bit player to take you if you have acute symptoms and you say, guess what, I just need something to calm me down. But you don't take painkillers all the time. Once you're having a pain, you take your painkillers if you need it, just like you go to hospital after surgery, and therefore you tail it off into doing other things that will heal you. That's the way I look at hormones for the acute situation.
Hmm.
Anyway, so my aim is to reach as many people as possible, and if I can reach, 100,000, I will be more. And I have reached, but I'm talking of more active 100,000. I
Hmm.
do have a large, following of people who are, taking some tips here and there. I'm talking of getting people out of it and letting them flourish and getting them into a transformation.
Absolutely. So as we get ready to close here, what is the most important message that you want women to take away from your work and from your own personal story, Dr. Taya?
If I can do it, so can they.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Can you share with us how can our listeners get a hold of you if they want to read about your book, know more about your work, follow you on social media? Where can they find you?
Okay, they can go to my website, which is the easiest way, and from then, if there are a couple of things on the website, they can either book a call if they feel like, or they can take a quiz if they, which will allow them to know what they're struggling with. And from then, they can enter into my ecosystem where they'll get a lot of information about, things like my books, etc. So it's getyoursassyback.com.
It's
Because I
your
want
sassyback.com.
I want women to get their sassy back, moving, not be a wallflower, be able to crush it, have their dreams and say, hey, I'm doing it confidently. So get yoursassy.com. Easily done.
I love it. I love it. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here as a guest on the Overcome University podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Bob.
Absolutely. Until next time, guys, God bless.
Ain't it all? Couple dollars in my pocket, no income and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.